Hey YouTube, I haven't made a video in a while and I had something kind of cool happen and I thought I'd make a video about it. And I know if you read the title of this, obviously that's probably why you clicked on it. I'm making a video about LS PCV systems and crankcase ventilation and all that fun stuff. But if you've watched any of my other videos, you know I ramble kind of like an idiot. So this will cover a lot of different things that I feel like rambling about, not just LS PCV systems. On a side note, my kids got a new toy. So this thing's awesome, by the way. I'm really super happy with these Outlaw 100s for a kid's quad. The thing carries me around the yard like nothing. That's my older 400 Polaris. But this thing really was worth every penny. It was really sweet. Anyway, so they were pretty happy. I went and picked that up. Other news, I got a new job. I'm no longer teaching. Anybody that had talked to me that knew I taught at an electrical trade school, I got a new job. I'm now going to be a maintenance guy in a hydroelectric power plant. So I start that on Monday. Today is Thursday. So anyway, all that personal crap aside, and pardon the mess in the garage. I'm still doing an eBay business where I sell stuff. I've got a 4L80E over there that's behind that pallet that's got to go in a crate. I've got a cone crane hoist I've got to sell. So I got a lot of junk packed in here that until I get a bigger garage, this is still where I run my eBay stuff out of. Anyway, PCV systems. So I had a problem in my LS swapped Corvette here where I was out doing some wide open tuning. I've got the Holley Terminator X and I was doing some data logs and I had my buddy with me and I was really giving it hell trying to see if it was going to, what it was doing at watt. Okay, wide open throttle. We're close to it anyway, at least over 3/4 throttles where I wanted to kind of start with some of that wide open tuning. And immediately I smelled burning oil as soon as I would hop on that throttle. And it's like, okay, it's puking oil out that PCV system. So the problem that I'm running into with this engine, this is let me actually pop the hood. I probably should have done that before I started the video because now I've got to figure out how to do it one-handed. Now I'm going to make you sick. There we go. That stop never wants to go in the right position. So 6-liter LQ9, ported heads, cam, yada, 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 in my 1984 Corvette. Okay, I kept the LQ9 hypereutetic pistons. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Hypereutetic. I kept the stock pistons for the LQ9, and I went with a Hastings ring set. And I gapped the rings for nitrous because eventually I'm going to put a big shot of nitrous on this. I just haven't gotten to it yet. That'll probably be a winter project, is getting the nitrous all plumbed. So this does a couple things. You throw in huge ring gaps with a big cam like this, and now you're going to have a lot more blow-by than what you would if you just had stock ring gap or something like that. So that's number one. And then the cam doesn't help either because it doesn't pull a lot of vacuum. So originally what I had when I could smell this burning oil, I didn't have a catch can or anything like that. All I had over here on this side, this is the clean air in on the vent side. I had a little filter here. I just had a tiny little cheap auto parts store filter here. And on the valve cover over here, I had a grommet that was in the valve cover. I had a cheap generic PCV. It wasn't even a PCV meant for an LS. It was just from like the help section at AutoZone. And I had that going to the vacuum line right here on this side of the intake. I had it routed this way. Yeah, I had it routed from here over and in. That was it. I just had a vacuum, PCV, and a little filter. Oops, before I walk away. What was happening, what I was smelling, somebody's trying to call me. What I was smelling was oil blasting out of that filter, and it was blowing right down on the side of the motor onto the exhaust. It was also blowing right into my alternator here. So that's bad for a lot of reasons, right? And you could see the oily residue on everything that it was. So it was coming out of the filter. And what I think was happening was if you don't know a lot about the LS-PCV situation, I've got some valve covers here. I'm going to show you different styles because I've pulled apart lots of LS motors for my eBay business. I've got tons of different, I have every variety here of basic Gen 3 and some Gen 4 LS valve covers and PCV systems. So the problem with what I had an open filter on one side and I had a PCV that was not the proper one on the other side. And it worked great at less than half throttle, but as soon as you really laid the throttle in, you lost vacuum. Because I had all that big ring gap in there, it was building up a lot of crankcase pressure at anything over half or 3/4 throttle, somewhere in there. It didn't have enough vacuum to pull through, and part of that's because the PCV was too small. It couldn't handle the amount of pressure that it was building in the crankcase. That was a big part of it, so it couldn't do anything with it. So what did I do to solve it? And I did solve it. For one, I wanted a catch can, but that wouldn't necessarily fix the problem. I just bought a cheap eBay catch can here, made an aluminum bracket, riveted it down to the fiberglass, works great. Filled it full of steel wool, and it's got a little dipstick here on it. It's fine. Ran new hoses. Okay, great. That was part of the problem. That would be normal cruise blow-by. Then I ditched the filter over here and I routed it into the actual air filter. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Chad, that will burn the oil. Well, yeah, it will. At wide open throttle, it is going to burn a little bit of oil, but I would rather it burn that oil than puke it on the side of my exhaust. I did something else though. There's more to it than just that. So I did some other things that will hopefully help stop it from even putting anything into that air filter. That's just the last line of defense. I want to talk about these valve covers and show you the differences inside on the valve cover. These two black ones here were the ones I used to have on the car. These are the culprits. These are the ones that gave me my problem. I had, you can see here, just a grommet that I had a PCV stuck into. If I turn this over, you can see part of the problem. GM didn't have a lot of room to make a baffle inside here. It's just this thin stamped piece of sheet metal, and they really didn't have a lot of room to deflect or to stop oil from going up through. And they didn't really need to on the PCV side anyway, because that's really what the valve was for. Same thing on the other side. If I look at the clean air side, or the side with the fill cap, same exact baffle. It's just, well, not exactly the same, but it's similar. It's just a stamped piece of steel over top of the hole, okay? Couple things that I learned as doing this, and I want to talk about this guy. This valve cover here, this is off of an LS4. This is off of a front-wheel drive Impala SS LS4. So it's a little different. You can see the stands for the coils are taller. Other than that, this is the only valve cover I had laying around. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. That's the wrong one. Hang on. That is off of an LS4, but I grabbed the wrong one. I'm sorry. This is the other one off of the LS4. I'm sorry. I had the wrong one. So the coil stands are a little taller, but you can see here, it doesn't have a grommet for a PCV. It has this hose built in, okay? So this style, the later style, or they called, I guess, the early Gen 4 motors, didn't use a PCV pressed into a grommet and a valve cover anymore. What GM did is they switched this to what's called a metered orifice. It's just a hole inside here that is of a very specific size that is a controlled vacuum leak that the computer can compensate for and still idle properly. If I flip this over, it's the same baffles that was in the other one. That doesn't change, but there is no spring, there's no plunger inside here like there is in a normal PCV valve, okay? Now, you don't have to swap valve covers if you want to convert from a PCV to the metered orifice. And if you have a valve cover like this, you don't have to swap valve covers. You can buy it looks like a PCV, but instead of having the spring and the little plunger inside, it just has, it's a body and has a metered orifice. I think I have one. Bear with me. I should, if I was more prepared, I would have had this all like laid out. Yep, I got it laying right here. It's this guy right here. This looks like a PCV, but it's not. Look, now I drilled it bigger because I was experimenting. The hole wasn't that big originally. But This is just a stamped piece of steel. I can see light through it, right? I mean, right there. It's just a metered orifice. Now, again, the hole is not normally this big. I drilled that bigger because I was experimenting with doing some different things, and it failed miserably. So don't. What I was trying to do is I was going to use an external PCV that didn't press into the valve cover. So I just tried drilling that bigger, and it didn't work at all. So it was just a failed experiment. But you can buy one of these if you want to. If you're having PCV problems, you can buy one of these and just pop it right in like that and run it, and you will get more oily gases out of your crankcase with one of these than what you will a PCV. But it is a controlled vacuum leak. You're going to have to compensate for your vacuum leak with your idle tuning and a bunch of other things. It may affect how it runs, idle and things like that. I was able to compensate for that part of it pretty easily, and it didn't really seem to matter. And you think about it, that's what GM did on vehicles that use this type, because this is the same thing. This is just a metered hole. It doesn't have the spring and the dent ball in it. This does a way better job of pulling all of your oily gases out of your crankcase than what a PCV valve does, okay? Modern fuel injection, especially the controllers these things have on them, it doesn't matter if you're running a Holley or an old 411 PCM or whatever, you can compensate for this, and it's not that big of a deal with your idle tuning, okay? I had to make just a couple little changes to my IAC once I converted to this, and it wasn't that big of a deal. So that was step one. Now I can move more gas. I can move more oily gas out of my crankcase because I switched to this. So you can see, well, maybe you can't see, it might be plugged. Oh yeah, you can see right here. So this is the new valve cover that I put on. And you can see right here, there is no PCV. This is just a truck valve cover off of a Silverado, and it just has that internal metered orifice. And I used the hard line and went from there. That's going over to the catch can right down there. Okay, so that was step one. Got rid of the PCV valve, swapped out for a valve cover that has a metered orifice. Some people, and I love online when you get these guys that are like, just throw money at it, right? Like that's an option for everybody, you know? And what people will say is, oh, just swap out to an LS6 valley cover. It has the PCV built in and works great. I don't know about you. I don't see a lot of LS6s running around in junkyards where I go. So I would rather have one of these for free or close to it and just use this because it works awesome instead of changing my valley cover or whatever you want to call it in an LS, because it's not actually the valley cover, but you know what I mean. No, I'm not going to change my valley cover out for an LS6. I'm not buying parts like that when I have this that came from a junkyard and it works perfectly fine. So that was step one. Convert from the PCV to this. If you've got a stock LS and you're running a PCV, stay with it. This is not your problem. But if you've got one with a lot of ring gap and you're having blow by, this might be an issue for you. That PCV is not going to flow as much as that. You can just swap in this, and I don't even know where to buy this, to tell you the truth. I found this in one engine that I sold. This was in it, and I thought it was interesting. So I know they make it. It's just the metered orifice that's designed to pop in a regular PCV that's gutless. There's nothing inside, no spring, nothing. It's just a hole through. But it does convert it to the same as this. So either way you do it would be fine. You either need one of these little adapters or just switch the valve cover from one in a junkyard. That's up to you. That was part one. Part two, if we look at the other valve cover, okay, the side that has your oil fill cap, this is the side I had my air filter attached to. I had that separate little filter, and I'll show you. It was this guy. I had this little thing, this little cute auto parts store filter, and it was just stuck right on there with a clamp, and that was my clean air in, right? Well, if I flip this over, I have the same baffle, like I said before, in here. So oil, I was building pressure on this side, and that pressure's got to go somewhere. The PCV on this valve cover was blocked off because it couldn't move enough pressure. So it's going to puke it out that air filter, and it dumped it right on my exhaust, which is why I was smelling the burning oil. So I started looking at the differences in valve covers because This valve cover specifically is off of an LS1. This is an actual LS1 valve cover. So is this. Off of a 2002 Camaro is what these two black ones came off of. This is one off of a Silverado. I can't tell you what year, to be honest with you, but this is the oil fill side. Same thing. I have my breather here, but I've got something different under this guy. Looky here. Now I realize this is an old caked up one. I have a completely different baffle design. I have this box. Now be careful, the top of this box is made of plastic. This is a plastic piece on top here. This is not aluminum right where I'm touching. So if you go cleaning this with a wire wheel, be careful because you can dig this up pretty good. Also, I would be reluctant to use oven cleaner here. I just don't know if it would mess with it. It would probably be fine, I don't know. But I just didn't. I just was careful around it and I used degreaser to clean up the one that's now in the car. So this box is a way better baffle design than this chunk of steel. This box has eliminated or virtually eliminated any of that oil blow-by, the oil itself in that gas from coming back out the air filter, which was this guy, right? I took it a step further though. So I swapped one of these on the car. That's what's on the other, the other side, the oil fill side. I swapped one that has this baffle in it because I noticed I got way less blow-by with this than I did with this guy. Originally, I did it with that air filter on one of these, and then I decided, well, let's go a step further. What if I'm wrong, and maybe if I keep beating the snot out of it, eventually it would blow by and puke oil back out that filter again. So as a last line of defense, I removed the filter, and I just plumbed it into the intake. I have a millions, or well, thousands of these stupid rubber grommets, and it worked perfect. So if it did actually puke any oil out, it's just going to dump it into the intake tract. So far, I've torn this apart a bunch of times and looked inside of it. It's completely clean. I see no oil inside that air tube whatsoever. None inside the intake manifold. But I don't like the idea of an open filter being here. You got to think, you got to risk a fire dumping right under the exhaust. You got a risk of puking oil right in the back of your alternator. I just didn't want it. I would rather it, if it's going to only do it at wide open throttle, fine. And if it burns a little bit of oil in the intake, I'm okay with that. The big thing is the catch cam stops oil that comes out during cruise, which is the majority of it. This here is only going to stop wide open throttle, it builds up so much pressure, it's got to go somewhere sort of thing. So that's it. That's my take on a PCV system. You have different valve covers. My experience, what I'm noticing on the clean air side, this box type, which is now what's on my car now, works much better. And the problem is pretty simple. Also, too, you have this wall here that I think that helps too. But the issue was that GM didn't really have a lot of space to work with because these valve covers are so damn low. And they tried a couple different designs, but for a bigger engine with big ring gap and a big cam, for me anyway, it seems as though this one works much better. I got way less blow-by with this. So what I did, I went with one of these with one of these, except it wasn't the LS4. It just had the straight up like you saw before, and a catch can. And that eliminated my oil blow-by problems with ring gap. I think I've got 50 thousandths ring gap on this thing because of all the nitrous I'm going to dump on it. Nice big Summit Stage 2 cam. It's just a street car, but it's got a lot of blow-by for what it is. But so far, so good. I don't have issues with that. Like I said, I did have to go through and do some changes in idle. Oh, speaking of idle, I did find out my idle problems, if you watch my other videos, my idle problems came back. I started having all kinds of crazy idle issues, and I found out the root cause of the whole thing. It took me forever to dig into it. The actual harness for the IAC, 2 of the 4 wires going to the IAC were pinched in the Holley harness right there. And I don't think it's Holley's fault. I think I accidentally did it when I dropped the motor down in. So what I did, and I couldn't see it on a continuity test on my meter. My meter would beep, but then I put it to ohms, and I noticed 2 of the wires were showing 4 ohms. The other 2 were showing none. So that told me, okay, they're the same gauge size wire and there shouldn't be any connections between them. Something's not right. So I ran 4 new wires in loom through the firewall, pinned it to the Holley ECU. All of my idle problems have 100% gone away. That completely fixed it, and it has ran like a dream ever since. Other than I still got to finish up some of my wide open tuning. I still don't have it completely done yet because I had to stop and fight with PCV systems. So that's it. That's about all I got. How do you like my, what do I want to call it? My coyote eating my chickens deterrent system that's there. Yeah, it works pretty good. But anyway, so if you have any questions on PCV, hit me up. I'll do the best that I can to answer it. Or if you have any interest in buying a cone crane 1-ton hoist, that'll be on eBay soon. Or I got a 4-wheel drive 4L80 over there I got to clean up yet. It only has 120,000 miles on it. You can see it a little bit better there. That's got to go. That's on eBay right now. I have it listed right now. I got to clean it up and take better pictures. Anyway, all right, thanks.